My older sister said, "So how's that $500,000 family fund?" I replied, "What fund?" On my 75th birthday, a date I hadn't even planned to mark with more than a cup of instant coffee, my younger sister's voice cut through the clink of cutlery and the low murmur of conversation. "Dila," Vivien called from the far end of my son's long dining table, her tone steady and clear. "Tell me something. Are you enjoying your $500,000 trust fund?" For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. The words floated around me, incomplete, like pieces of a sentence that refused to fit together. Then meaning landed with a dull, painful thud in my chest. My throat went dry. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. "What trust fund are you talking about?" I whispered. To my left, my son Reggie's fork hit his plate with a sharp clatter. Across from me, my daughter-in-law, Chelsea, went the color of unbaked dough. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them even tried. Vivien's eyes, sharp from decades of boardrooms and contracts, moved from my face to theirs. When she spoke again, the warmth slipped from her voice. "All right," she said calmly. "Then let me ask you both. What did you do with the money?" The silence that followed wasn't ordinary silence. It was thick and suffocating, a silence that had weight and shape. A silence that screamed, "We're hiding something," even though no one dared to say it out loud. The house, with its glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors, didn't smell like a celebration that night. It smelled like endings. The kind of goodbye you feel in your bones long before anyone admits it's coming. I sat at the head of the table, in a chair that wasn't mine, in a house that had never truly welcomed me, surrounded by crystal glasses and expensive dinnerware I had never been able to afford. 75 years old. 75 years of being quiet, accommodating, and grateful for crumbs. Reggie had insisted on hosting this dinner at his beautiful home, so many times that I finally gave in. Not because I was eager to come, but because mothers rarely stop begging for their children's affection, even when it means swallowing what's left of their pride. My name is Delilah Ames. I grew up in a neighborhood where girls were taught to keep their voices low and their expectations even lower. You obeyed. You smiled. You swallowed hurt as if it were your daily bread. I married young. I had 2 children. I became a widow 5 years ago. Since then, I've lived in a cramped 1-bedroom place called the Heights, surviving on a pitiful pension that barely covered my groceries. Reggie lives in a 3-story house with a lawn that looks like it belongs in a magazine and a swimming pool I've never stepped into. Chelsea wears designer dresses and trades in her SUV like clockwork every couple of years. My grandchildren attend private schools that charge more per month than my rent for several months combined. I always told myself they earned it, that they worked harder than I ever did, that I had no right to ask for anything, because I had already done my part by raising them. But when Vivien asked that question, "Are you enjoying your $500,000 trust fund?" something inside me cracked. Or maybe it finally woke up after sleeping for far too long. Vivien is my little sister by 5 years. She's 70 now and lives several hours away. She built her life like a skyscraper, consulting firm, international travel, tailored suits, a scent of expensive perfume wherever she goes. We don't see each other often. Not because of bad blood, but because our lives grew in opposite directions. She built wealth. I built what I thought was a family. She'd arrived that night with a gift wrapped in gold paper and a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce, much less afford. She hugged me tight and told me I looked good, though we both knew I'd grown thinner and more tired, my energy dulled by years of scraping by. She sat beside me, chatting about airports, clients, and projects. Reggie and Chelsea gave her polite answers, their smiles stretched too tight to be real. The grandchildren stayed upstairs, absorbed in their screens. Conversation flowed in awkward spurts, broken by long pauses and the constant clink of cutlery. It felt like everyone was waiting for something neither of us could name, until Vivien refilled her glass, fixed that laser-sharp gaze on me, and asked, almost casually, "Dila, I've been wondering about something for a while. How's your $500,000 trust fund treating you?" The world tilted. A low buzz filled my ears. What trust? I managed. What are you talking about, Vivien? She frowned, genuinely puzzled. The trust fund Jeremiah set up for you before he passed, she said slowly. I was with him in the attorney's office when he signed the paperwork. $500,000. In an irrevocable trust for you. Monthly payments for life. She looked straight at me. You're not using it. I felt as if the floor had shifted from under my chair. My husband. A trust. $500,000. This was not the life of a woman taking the bus because she couldn't afford the fare. This was not the life of a woman measuring coffee granules so the jar would last till the end of the month. I don't know anything about that, I said, my voice breaking. I've never seen a document. I never heard about a trust. I just got my pension. Vivien set her wineglass down with a soft but deliberate thud. Her expression hardened. The affectionate sister vanished. In her place stood the woman I knew from stories, the one who negotiated contracts no one dared back out of. Her gaze slid to Reggie and Chelsea. They looked like they were glued to their chairs, unable to move. What? Vivien repeated more slowly. Did you do with the money? Reggie's throat bobbed. He tried to smile, but it came out twisted and thin. Aunt Vivien, I think there's some confusion. There's no confusion, she snapped. I was present when your father signed those documents. I signed as a witness. $500,000 in an irrevocable trust. In your mother's name. Monthly payments for the rest of her life. So I'll ask again, Reggie. Where is it? Chelsea pushed her chair back so violently it almost toppled. I need to use the bathroom, she muttered, fleeing the room without waiting for an answer. Reggie stayed seated, opening and closing his mouth as if searching for words that refused to come. His eyes never met mine. And in that moment, though no one had confessed a thing, I understood more than enough. My sister wasn't lying. My son had taken what belonged to me. And all those years I'd lived as if poor, ashamed to ask for help, apologizing for needing anything at all, while my son enjoyed a life funded by money that was supposed to protect me. Mama, Reggie began, his voice slipping into that same childish tone he used when caught misbehaving as a boy. Let me explain. I raised a trembling hand. Not now, I said. Not yet. Vivien had already pulled out her phone. I'm calling Elias, she announced. The attorney who handled Jeremiah's estate. He'll have the documents. Reggie's face blanched. Auntie, that's really not. Oh, it's very necessary, she said, pressing the call button. We're done hiding things from Delilah. I stared at my untouched plate as their voices blurred around me. My husband had built a safety net for me. I had never received a single payment from it. For 5 years I'd lived on less than $800 a month, skipping meals, patching clothes, selling jewelry, while my son and his family lived like members of a lifestyle magazine spread. Tears spilled down my cheeks, not gentle tears of sorrow, but hot, burning tears of humiliation and fury. Vivien ended the call and placed her hand firmly over mine. Elias is on his way, she said. We're going to sort this out. I promise. Reggie sat stiff and pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Chelsea was still hiding somewhere in her marble bathroom. My birthday dinner had shattered like a dropped glass. And I, the guest of honor, was just realizing I'd been the target of a crime for 5 silent years. To understand how I arrived at that dining table, shaking like a leaf while the truth unfurled, you have to trace my steps backward, back through decades of silence, obedience, and small sacrifices no one ever truly saw. I've always been the kind of woman who hovers at the edges of photographs. The one who brews coffee but rarely sits to drink it. The one who cooks for a crowd and eats whatever's left over. The one people vent to but never ask, and how are you really? I didn't become that woman accidentally. I was trained into it by a world that told me it was noble. When Jeremiah died suddenly of a heart attack 5 years earlier, my life unraveled. He'd been the quiet, steady kind of man who handled every bill, every form, every signature. I trusted him completely. If he pointed to a line and said, "Sign here," I signed. I never imagined there was anything else I needed to know. After the funeral, Reggie stepped in. He took over the paperwork, spoke with the lawyer, and explained everything in that confident tone that doesn't invite questions. He said there were debts, that the pension would be small, that we'd have to sell the house to clear everything. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. I moved into a tiny one-bedroom unit in a tired building far from my old neighborhood. The rent was cheap, but so was everything else about it. Leaky pipes, peeling paint, a kitchen barely big enough for one person. My pension was around $800 a month. Rent took nearly half. The rest stretched thin over groceries, medicine, and utilities. I learned the art of survival on a thread, walking instead of catching the bus, buying store-brand food, turning off lights the moment I left a room, diluting my coffee until it tasted like flavored water. Reggie visited once a month, if that. He'd always be rushing, phone in hand, half listening. He'd pull 2 crisp $100 bills from his wallet, toss them on the table, and say, "This is all I can spare right now, Mama." I would thank him as if he'd given me treasure. In a way he had. That 200 meant meat on the table instead of just rice. It meant I could keep my dignity one more month without asking anyone else for help. Chelsea never came. There were always excuses. Work, the kids, events. The rare times I saw her, she looked at me the way people look at something they wish someone else would move. Not cruelty exactly. More like impatience. An old object taking up space. Whenever I visited their house for holidays, I sat in rooms that felt like another world. 3 floors, everything shining and new. A kitchen with more appliances than I could name. Fabrics and finishes that spoke of expensive catalogs. The grandchildren would hug me out of habit and vanish to their rooms, surrounded by gadgets that cost more than my monthly budget. I wondered sometimes how they'd managed so much. Reggie talked vaguely about investments and opportunities. I chalked it up to him being smarter, more ambitious, luckier than his father. I told myself over and over that I was proud, that I didn't need what they had, that my little life was enough. My neighbor across the hall, Pet, saw through the mask. She was a widow too, but her circumstances were different. Better pension, children who called daily, grandchildren who came over with flowers and hugs. She noticed the same clothes I wore week after week. She heard me crying through the thin walls when I thought I was being quiet. "You've always been the type to swallow everything and keep going," she told me one afternoon over thin tea at a kitchen table. "But no one's handing out medals for suffering in silence, Delilah. Sometimes the only way to live is to spit out what's killing you." I laughed weakly, insisting I was fine, that my son did what he could, that I didn't want to be a burden. She didn't look convinced. "One day you'll wake up," she said softly. "I just hope it's not too late." Her words clung to me like a shadow. The weeks leading up to my birthday were oddly unsettled. Reggie called more often than usual. His voice was warm, too warm. "Mama, your birthday's coming," he said one Tuesday. Tuesday. He never called on Tuesdays. "Chelsea and I want to have dinner here. Just family. We'll send a car to pick you up." "Reggie, you don't need to make a fuss," I said automatically. "I'm fine. I don't need anything." "We want to," he replied, a little too quickly. "The kids are excited. It'll be special." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my son was finally seeing me again, not as an obligation but as his mother. I said yes, though something in my chest felt tight and uneasy. A week later he called again. "Mama, have you spoken to Aunt Vivien lately?" "No," I answered. "A couple of months maybe." "Why?" "No reason," he said far too fast. "Just curious. Anyway, about the dinner. Let's keep it small. Just us. No outsiders." "Of course, son. Whatever you think is best." But his question about Vivien stayed with me. Why did her name make him sound nervous? When I mentioned all this to Pet, she frowned. "Do you trust your son?" she asked gently. "He's my son," I said, the answer almost a reflex. "Of course I do. Even though he lets you live like this while he lives like that," she pressed. "Even though he only shows up when it suits him? Even though your life looks nothing like the security his father promised?" "He helps me," I protested. "He has his own family to worry about. I don't want to be in the way." She sighed. "Good people like you are the easiest to walk all over, Delilah. I'm not saying he's evil. I'm saying don't keep your eyes closed just because it's more comfortable." Her words echoed louder and louder in the quiet moments. Why was Reggie so comfortable financially, if there had truly been nothing left for me? Why had I never seen any documents? Why had I signed whatever he handed me without reading? One afternoon, I pulled out the box of old papers from my closet. Funeral receipts, insurance notices, letters I never answered. At the bottom was a letterhead I recognized. Carter Law Group. It was addressed to Reggie, mentioning finalizing the estate and a trust structure. My name appeared only once, in a vague sentence. There was a number printed beneath the attorney's name, Elias Carter. I tucked the paper into my handbag and carried it around for days, as if it was something alive. I kept telling myself I didn't need to call, that it was none of my business, that Reggie had taken care of everything. Then, on the Friday before my birthday, Reggie appeared at my door without calling first. That never happened. "Mama, we need to talk," he said, stepping into my little apartment and looking around as if seeing it for the first time. "Is everything all right?" I asked. Yeah. He didn't sit down. He kept shifting from foot to foot. "Just wanted to confirm that you're coming Tuesday. It's important that you be there." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "And Mama, if anyone calls you about Dad's money or paperwork, strangers, don't listen. There are a lot of scams targeting widows. Just hang up and tell me, okay?" I stared at him, my heart beginning to pound. "Who would call me?" "No one," he said too quickly. "Just being cautious." After he left in a hurry, my small living room felt even smaller. Fear, suspicion, and love twisted together inside me until I couldn't tell which feeling belonged where. The next day, I sat staring at that lawyer's number for hours before finally dialing. A woman answered and transferred me. Then a man's voice came on the line. "Mrs. Ames," he said kindly. "I'm Elias Carter. I handled your husband's affairs some years back. How can I help you?" "I'm sorry to bother you," I began, my voice shaking. I wanted to ask if there were any documents I should have, anything about my husband's estate. I don't understand these things. I only know what my son told me." There was a long silence. Then his tone changed, no longer casual, but careful. "Mrs. Ames," he said slowly, "I believe there are some things you and I need to discuss. In person, if possible." I should have agreed right away. Instead, fear made me hesitate. "Can we speak after my birthday?" I asked. "My son is planning dinner. I don't want to cause trouble before then." "All right," he replied quietly. "But please, don't let this wait too long." On the morning of my 75th birthday, the sky outside my window was dull and gray. It felt like an omen. I woke early, though the dinner wasn't until evening. I spent the whole day feeling as if something invisible was coming, something I wasn't ready for. Pet came over with a small, homemade cake and one candle pressed into the center. "Nobody should reach 75 without blowing out at least one candle," she said, hugging me. We ate cake and drank weak coffee. She listened as I told her about the call with the attorney, about Reggie's strange behavior, about this gnawing sense that something was terribly wrong. "Remember what I said," she told me, squeezing my hand. "If anything feels off tonight, don't swallow it. Don't let them talk over you. You don't owe anyone your silence." He's my son, I whispered, the words sounding more like a question than a fact. And you're his mother, she replied. The woman who broke her own back so he could stand tall. Don't forget that. By the time the rideshare arrived that evening, my stomach was in knots. The driver was friendly. Big night, he asked. Just a birthday dinner, I answered, staring out the window at the glow of passing shops. I didn't tell him it felt like I was being driven to a reckoning. Reggie's house shimmered with warm light. The lawn was flawless, the cars polished, the front door framed by expensive-looking plants. Chelsea opened the door in a dress that looked like it came straight off a runway. Her smile was bright and practiced. Delilah, happy birthday, she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. Come in, come in. Inside, the air smelled of garlic and butter and roasted meat, smells I associated with holidays I could no longer afford to host. Reggie greeted me with a big grin and a quick hug that somehow still felt distant. The grandchildren descended briefly, hugged me with one arm each, then retreated back upstairs. We made small talk in the living room. Chelsea offered me wine. I asked for water. Reggie kept checking his phone. His laugh sounded forced. 30 minutes crawled by. Then the doorbell rang. Reggie's face was drained of color. Chelsea stiffened, her hand clenching around her wineglass. They exchanged a look that made my heart sink. Are you expecting someone else? I asked. No, Reggie said too quickly. Probably a delivery. But when Chelsea opened the door, I heard a familiar voice. Dila, Vivien exclaimed, walking into the house like a burst of fresh air. She was immaculate as always, tailored suit, elegant heels, subtle jewelry. She carried a gold-wrapped gift and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than I'd ever spent on groceries in one go. I hadn't known she was coming. Judging from Reggie's expression, neither had he. Happy 75th, big sister, she said, pulling me into a real hug, a tight, rib-squeezing embrace that made my eyes sting. You didn't think I was going to miss this, did you? Reggie stammered something about how unexpected and nice it was that she'd come. Vivien smiled politely, moved to sit beside me, and then began to ask questions my son clearly wished she wouldn't. Are you eating well, Dila? She asked. Do you have enough money? Is your place comfortable? I lied the way I'd trained myself to lie. I'm fine. I manage. Everything's okay. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe a word of it. As we moved to the dining room, the table looked ready for a magazine shoot. Fine china, polished silver, tall glasses. They seated me at the head. Vivien took the chair at my right. Reggie and Chelsea sat across, the children at the ends, already restless. The food was delicious. I could taste the quality in every bite. But instead of enjoying it, I felt like an intruder in a life that should never have belonged to my son at all. Halfway through the main course, Vivien set down her fork, took a slow drink of wine, and looked at me. Her eyes were not soft. They were searching. Delilah, she said, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. And tonight seems as good a time as any. I nodded, feeling that twist of dread return. Are you enjoying the $500,000 Jeremiah left you in your trust fund? She asked. The room went dead quiet. By the time she repeated the figure, $500,000, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What trust fund? I whispered. Vivien, what are you talking about? The one Jeremiah set up with Elias, she replied, frowning. I was there, Delilah. I watched him sign the documents. I signed as a witness. He was very clear. $500,000 set aside so you be safe and comfortable for the rest of your life. Monthly payments. Protected. You mean to tell me you've never received any of it? Whatever air was left in the room vanished. I don't know anything about that, I said, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. No one told me. I only get my small pension. That's all. Vivien's glass hit the table with a soft, decisive sound. She turned toward Reggie and Chelsea, her face suddenly sharp as a blade. "What?" she asked in a voice that made everyone flinch. "Did you do with my brother-in-law's money?" Reggie tried to laugh it off at first, but the sound died halfway out of his throat. "Aunt Vivien, I think there's some mix-up. Maybe you're remembering wrong." "There's no mix-up," she cut in, her voice icy. "Jeremiah created an irrevocable trust solely for Delilah's benefit. $500,000. $4,000 a month for life." I sat beside him in Elias's office while he gave instructions. "So if my sister is living off a pension in a rundown apartment, someone needs to explain where that money went." Chelsea shot up from her chair as if she'd been burned. I have to go to the bathroom," she stammered, retreating so fast she nearly knocked over a glass. The grandchildren looked terrified and confused. They asked if they could leave the table. Reggie nodded without taking his eyes off the tablecloth. When the children slipped away, only the three of us and the empty chairs remained. Vivien, fierce and unblinking, Reggie, pale and sweating, and me, feeling like my world was crumbling one quiet crack at a time. "Reggie," I said, surprised by the calm in my own voice, "is what your aunt is saying true?" His shoulders sagged. "Mama, it's complicated." "No, it's not," Vivien snapped. "It's very simple. Yes or no. Did you know about trust?" He hesitated just long enough to confirm everything. "Yes," he finally whispered. I knew. The words struck me harder than any slap could have. "And why?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "Didn't I know?" "Dad named me the administrator," he said quickly. "I was supposed to manage the trust for you. I thought I could invest it, grow it, make it stretch further for the family." "What family?" Vivien demanded. "Because the only person legally entitled to that money is sitting right here, in this chair, with nothing to her name but broken promises. I always meant to give it to her," he insisted. "Just not right away. I wanted to make sure the kids' futures were secure first, the house, the business, and—" "So you secured your own comfort," she interrupted, "with money that wasn't yours." The room seemed to spin. My voice, when I found it, sounded sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Reggie, for 5 years, I've been counting coins and selling my belongings just to buy food. You brought me $200 once a month like charity. All this time, you've known there was money for me." He couldn't answer. His eyes skittered away. Vivien was already dialing her phone. "I'm calling Elias," she announced. "He's going to bring every document, every statement." Reggie reached for her arm. "Auntie, please. Let's handle this as a family. We don't need lawyers." "As a family," she scoffed. "You forfeited the right to handle this as a family when you let your mother starve while you redecorated your kitchen." She stepped away, speaking quietly to the attorney. When she finished, she returned to her seat and looked at me with softened eyes. "He's on his way," she said gently. "He'll explain everything." Chelsea reappeared, mascara smudged, lips trembling. She stood near the doorway, as if she needed a clear escape route. "We didn't do anything malicious," she said, her voice shrill. "We're just bad with money. We thought we could pay it back. The kids' school, the house, the business, everything's so expensive. You don't understand how much pressure." "You don't get to hide behind pressure," Vivien shot back. "You had options. You chose theft." "We didn't steal," Chelsea began. "Yes, you did," came a new voice from the doorway. We all turned. A man in his 60s, sharply dressed, stood there holding a leather briefcase. His expression was grave. "Good evening," he said. "I'm sorry to intrude on what was meant to be a celebration. I'm Elias Carter." He nodded to me with genuine regret. "Mrs. Ames. We spoke on the phone. I only wish we'd had this conversation sooner." He laid a thick folder on the table and began spreading out documents. I could barely see through my tears, but I recognized my husband's signature. It was my name. There was the figure. $500,000. Your husband was very clear, Mrs. Ames, Elias explained. These funds were placed in an irrevocable trust exclusively for your benefit. Your son Reggie was named trustee, with the legal obligation to pay you $4,000 every month for as long as you live. He was allowed to make investment decisions, yes, but always with your needs first. He looked at me kindly. Have you received any monthly payments from this trust? I shook my head. I didn't even know it existed. Elias's jaw clenched. And did anyone explain the contents of your husband's will to you? No, I whispered. Reggie told me there were debts. He said the house had to be sold to cover everything and that there would only be a small pension for me. Elias slid another document toward us. There were no outstanding debts significant enough to consume the estate, he said. The sale of the house, combined with your husband's savings and life insurance, formed the principal of this trust. Everything was designated for you. My stomach lurched. The house too. The place where I'd raised my children, sold with the promise that it was necessary. What happened to the money? Vivien asked, her voice low and dangerous. Elias flipped to a set of bank statements. Within the first year after Mr. Ames's death, he said, $50,000 was withdrawn as a down payment on this house. Another $100,000 went into renovations and furnishings. Then $30,000 for a vehicle. Over the next 2 years, the remaining funds were drained via smaller transfers, business investments, personal expenses. He turned to Reggie. Do you have any records showing that these investments were made for your mother's benefit? Reggie's silence answered for him. So tell me plainly, Elias continued. Can you return the original $500,000 plus the payments you owed your mother for the past 5 years? Reggie bowed his head. Chelsea covered her face with her hands. Approximately $240,000 in unpaid monthly distributions, Elias added quietly. Combined with the principal, we're looking at well over $700,000 that never reached the rightful beneficiary. The number made my head spin. 700,000. More money than I had ever imagined having. More security than I ever dreamed of. Gone. What's left? Vivien asked. Roughly 30,000, Elias replied. That's all that remains untouched. A bitter laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. 30,000. After a lifetime of work, my husband's careful planning, and 5 years of my hunger and humiliation, 30,000 remained. What can we do? Vivien asked, businesslike, as if negotiating a contract. What options does my sister have? Several, Elias replied. We can file a civil lawsuit demanding repayment of all misappropriated funds plus damages. We can file criminal charges, fraud, elder financial abuse, breach of fiduciary duty. Or we can attempt to reach a private settlement under strict legal terms. He looked at me. The decision is yours, Mrs. Ames. Nobody else's. I felt dizzy. The room, the marble, the expensive art on the walls, they all blurred together. I stood and walked slowly to the window, gripping the back of a chair for balance. Outside, the neighborhood glowed with comfortable wealth, landscaped lawns, neat sidewalks, warm lights in neatly lined homes. So much illusion. So much built on what should have kept me safe. Mama, Reggie said from behind me, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll pay you back. I'll do whatever it takes. If you were going to fix it, I said without turning around, you would have started by telling me the truth. At any point in the last 5 years. He had no answer. I turned slowly to face him. His eyes were wet. For a moment I saw my little boy again, the one who'd run home crying when kids made fun of his shoes, the one who'd pressed sticky fingers into my palm. That boy was gone. In his place stood a grown man who had made choice after choice to protect himself at my expense. Did you ever feel guilty? I asked quietly. Even once. Did it ever keep you awake at night, knowing I was living in a tiny apartment, eating soup from a can while you drove cars bought with my money? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The answering silence was louder than anything he could have said. "And you," I said, turning to Chelsea. "Did you know?" She gave a tiny nod, barely more than a flinch. "You watched me show up in the same clothes year after year," I continued. "You saw me counting coins in my wallet. You knew I couldn't buy proper gifts for my grandchildren. And you said nothing." Chelsea began to cry. We thought you were used to living simply. We didn't think you needed that much." "I'm sorry." "The worst part," I said, my voice steady now, "isn't the money. It's that you both let me believe I was a burden while living off what was mine." The doorbell rang again. This time, I didn't flinch. Elias gathered his papers. "We don't have to make decisions tonight," he said gently. "Mrs. Ames, I'll prepare a full report for you. You'll see every transfer, every withdrawal. After that, we'll decide how to proceed." "I'm leaving," I said. "I'll drive you," Vivien replied immediately. "Mama," Reggie pleaded, "please don't leave like this. We can talk." "We've done nothing but talk around me for 5 years," I replied. "Now I'm done listening to lies." I walked past the marble, past the designer wallpaper, past the furniture bought with my husband's trust. At the doorway, I turned. Reggie stood in the middle of his fine living room, looking small in his own luxury. For so long, I had done anything to avoid seeing that my son was capable of hurting me. That night, denial finally died. "Happy birthday to me," I said quietly. Then I stepped out of his house and into the cool night air, leaving behind the life that had been built on my silence. Vivien drove with both hands tight on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the road. The city lights slid past my window in streaks as tears spilled down my face. "Do you want me to come up?" she asked softly when we reached my building. I shook my head. "I need to be alone." "Call me if you change your mind," she said. "Any time." "I mean it." I climbed the stairs to my apartment, every step heavier than the last. When I opened the door and stepped inside, I saw everything differently. The cramped living room. The worn cushions. The tiny kitchen with its old, rattling fridge. The bathroom with the eternally leaking faucet. This wasn't just modest living. It was a theft made visible. I sat on my sagging second-hand sofa and finally broke. I cried for all 5 missing years. For every meal skipped, every bill that made my stomach twist. For every moment I'd felt ashamed of needing help while my son lived in comfort with the very resources meant to protect me. I also cried out of something fiercer. Rage. Rage at a world that trained me to be grateful for the bare minimum. Rage at a life that taught me endurance but never boundaries. Rage at myself for never asking questions. A soft knock interrupted my sobs. I opened the door to find Pet holding 2 mugs of tea. "I saw you come in," she said gently. "I made tea. I had a feeling you'd need it." We sat on the sofa. I told her everything. The trust, the lie about debts, the lawyer, the bank statements, the confrontation. By the time I finished, my throat was raw. Pet squeezed my hands. "Do you know what happened tonight?" she asked. "My son robbed me," I replied. "Yes," she said. "But something else, too. Tonight you finally stopped swallowing what was poisoning you. Tonight you opened your mouth and demanded the truth. That's not nothing, Delilah. That's the start of everything." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel ruined." "Falling apart and being weak aren't the same thing," she said. "Sometimes you have to let the old version of yourself crumble so you can build something better out of the pieces." Over the next few days, life took on a strange rhythm. Elias sent over thick envelopes filled with copies of statements and contracts. Vivien showed up almost daily, her hair pulled back, glasses on, ready to go through everything line by line. She explained terms I'd never heard before, and made sure I understood one thing clearly: none of this was my fault. Reggie called. Again and again. I let his calls go to voicemail. His messages were full of apologies and promises. "I'll fix it," Mama. I'll sell things. I'll make it right. Please call me back. Chelsea called too. Her tone was sharper. Think about the family. Think about the children. Don't be selfish. We're all going to suffer if you go to court. Every message shredded another layer of the old Delilah, the one who would have felt guilty for causing distress, who would have rushed to soothe everyone else while ignoring her own pain. One afternoon, Vivien sat across from me with a folder in her lap. I've been speaking with Elias, she said. We've sketched out a strategy one think might work. But it has to come from you, Dila. Not from me. What kind of strategy? I asked, wary. One that gets as much of your money back as possible, she replied. And makes sure Reggie faces real consequences. Not a slap on the wrist and a few crocodile tears. Real accountability. Without necessarily wrecking the grandchildren's lives in the process. She explained the options. A lawsuit that could drag on for years, criminal charges that could land my son in prison, or a legally ironclad settlement that would force him to repay me and live with the debt he created. Can I really do this? I asked, more to myself than to her. You can, she said. But the question is, do you want to? That night I barely slept. I paced between my bedroom and the living room. I sat at the table where I counted coins and cut coupons. I stood at the window and watched strangers hurry by with their own invisible burdens. I thought about the little girl I once was who loved books and dreamed of becoming a teacher, until someone told her that girls belonged in kitchens, not classrooms. I thought about the young wife who wanted to work but accepted her husband's insistence that good wives stay home. I thought about the mother who sold her wedding ring so her son could go to university, and then let that same son convince her she didn't have a right to ask where her money went. By dawn, my decision was clear. I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The same wrinkles. The same white hair. The same hands, roughened by years of scrubbing and lifting and comforting. But my eyes looked different. There was something steely there now, beneath the exhaustion. I don't have to shout to be heard, I told the tired woman in the mirror. I just have to stop whispering. Then I picked up my phone and called Elias. I've made my choice, I told him. I want to press charges. And I want to recover whatever can be recovered. We'll do it properly. On paper. And I won't be talked out of it. 3 days later, we all met in Elias's office. The room was neat and professional. Shelves of legal books, certificates on the walls, sunlight slanting across the desk. Reggie sat on one side of the table, looking older in just a few days. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. Chelsea sat beside him, arms crossed tight, her jaw clenched. Vivien sat next to me, not speaking for me, but letting her presence be a wall at my back. Elias sat across from us with a stack of documents neatly arranged. Thank you all for coming, he began. We're here to see if we can resolve this without a lengthy court process. I want to be very clear. Mrs. Ames controls the outcome. Nothing will be agreed without her consent. Mama, Reggie burst out. I just want to say how sorry I am. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but... I raised my hand. You'll have time to speak, I said. Right now, you're going to listen. He fell silent. For 5 years, I said, taking a deep breath. You let me live in poverty while spending money that was meant for me. You lied to me about debts that didn't exist. You assured a lawyer you were taking care of me when you weren't. You made me believe I was a burden. You watched me thank you for every little scrap you tossed in my direction. You knew exactly what you were doing. Reggie's eyes filled, but I did not stop. So from today onward, I continued, the rules are different. I'm not the obedient mother who accepts whatever you decide. I'm the woman your father trusted with his life's savings. And I'm here to reclaim what was mine. Elias slid a packet of papers toward us. These, he said, outline the options. Option 1, he continued, is a civil lawsuit. We sue for the entire missing amount, principal plus unpaid distributions and damages. We're looking at roughly $800,000, perhaps more with interest. If the court agrees, your assets could be seized to pay the judgment. I don't have $800,000, Reggie said hoarsely. You had it, Vivien said. You spent it. Option 2, Elias went on, is criminal prosecution. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, elder financial abuse. A conviction could carry several years in prison. Chelsea gasped. You can't send him to prison. He's her son. Those laws are for strangers, scammers, not family. The kids need their father. The law doesn't ignore abuse just because it comes from people you share a last name with, I replied quietly. And option 3, Elias said, is a structured settlement. You acknowledge the theft. You agree in writing to repayment under terms your mother chooses. That agreement will have teeth. If you break it, we immediately pursue options 1 and 2. Reggie swallowed hard. What would those terms be? All eyes turned to me. You will sell the house, I said. The one Jeremiah's money paid for. That house is no longer yours. Where are we supposed to go? Chelsea burst out. We can't just. You'll go wherever you can afford to live with your own money, I said. Just like I had to. You'll also sell the cars, I continued. Liquidate any investments bought with trust funds. All that money goes into a new account in my name, with Elias as a co-signer. From there, we rebuild a proper trust, with me as administrator. Nobody else touches it. Reggie's face crumpled. That still won't be enough to replace everything. Then you'll pay the rest, I said. Every month. For as long as it takes. We've worked out the numbers. Elias slid another document in front of him. You would agree to pay your mother $3,000 a month on top of her new trust distributions, he explained, for up to 20 years if necessary. Payments will be automatic. Miss one, and the agreement becomes void. At that point, we proceed with civil and criminal action. That's too much, Chelsea protested. We have bills. The kids' schools, activities, insurance. It's unrealistic. Your children can attend public school like everyone else, Vivien said coolly. They can learn that there are consequences when you live beyond your means with stolen money. One more thing, I added. I want the children to know the truth. Not every detail, not all at once. But I want them to understand, in a way appropriate for their age, that their father did something wrong and is making it right. Not that their grandmother attacked the family. I will not be turned into the villain in this story. Reggie stared at the papers, his hands trembling. Are you really going to do this to me, Mama? He whispered. No, I answered. You did this to yourself. I'm just refusing to hide it anymore. Elias pointed to the signature line. Mr. Ames, Mrs. Ames, he said, glancing at Chelsea. If you sign, you agree to these terms fully. Reggie looked up at me, desperate for the old softness he used to rely on. Instead, he found a woman who had finally discovered she mattered. Sign, I said quietly, or I'll see you in court. With shaking hands, he picked up the pen. He signed each page where Elias indicated. Chelsea signed too, as co-debtor, her lips pressed into a white line. Every stroke of ink tied them to the debt they'd created and the consequences they'd hoped to avoid. When it was done, Elias collected the papers. You have 30 days to sell the house and transfer the initial lump sum, he said. Monthly payments begin immediately after. If you default, I will move forward with the lawsuit and criminal complaint without further discussion. Reggie wiped his eyes. Will you ever forgive me? He asked quietly. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe someday. Maybe never. But either way, my life will not be built around waiting for your apology. Vivien and I stood. We walked out of the office together, leaving behind the echo of Reggie's mistake and the start of my own new life. Outside, the sun felt warmer than I remembered. The air didn't smell like fear. It smelled like something else. Possibly, maybe. How do you feel? Vivien asked as we stepped onto the sidewalk. Lighter, I said. And tired. But mostly free. 6 months later, I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment, watching the sky turn pink over the buildings, a mug of real coffee warming my hands. Not instant. Not watered down. Coffee brewed from freshly ground beans I chose myself at the store without checking the price 3 times first. The apartment isn't huge, but to me it feels like a palace. 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for guests. A proper kitchen where everything works. A bathroom with no leaks and tiles that don't crumble at the edges. And this balcony, a little square of open air where I can sit and breathe and remember that my life didn't end at 75. In many ways, it finally began. After the settlement, the house sold quickly. Once the mortgage and debts were cleared, $200,000 came directly to me. The luxury car and other assets added more. In the end, I recovered nearly $300,000. Not all of what had been stolen, but enough to keep me safe and comfortable. Under Elias's guidance, we placed the recovered money into a new trust that I control. Not Reggie. Not anyone else. For the first time in my life, I sat in a meeting and had someone explain, line by line, exactly what my options were. I asked questions. I made decisions. I didn't let anyone wave forms in my face with, "Just sign here." It felt like learning a new language, one I should have been taught decades ago. Now, every month, a payment lands in my account from that trust, enough to cover all my bills with room to breathe. On top of that, a second deposit arrives. The $3,000 Reggie is legally obligated to send me. So far, he hasn't missed a payment. The consequences of doing so are clear, and he knows I'm no longer too afraid to enforce them. Vivien visits often. Sometimes we dress up and go to a nice restaurant, places I used to walk past, telling myself, people like me don't belong there. Other days we stay in, eat simple food, and talk for hours. She no longer looks at me like the fragile older sister who needs protecting. She looks at me like an equal. I still see Pet, even though we don't live in the same building anymore. She comes over for tea, and we laugh until our sides hurt. She likes to remind me, "I told you one day you'd stop swallowing everything. Look at you now, teaching others to spit out their poison too." Reggie and I speak once a month, usually when he calls to confirm payments or give brief updates. Their family now lives in a smaller rental, the children attend public school, and Chelsea has taken a job. Their lifestyle has shrunk, but they're not starving. They've simply come back down to a level that never should have been financed by my suffering in the first place. Do I miss him? Some days, yes. Do I wish things had been different? Of course. But I no longer measure my value by his affection. He made his choices. I made mine. My grandchildren text occasionally. Their messages are clumsy and sweet. Photos from school events, questions about how I'm doing, little "love you" grandma notes. Reggie told them in a simplified way that he mishandled money that belonged to me and is working to put things right. They're still children. One day, when they're older, they'll understand more. Somewhere along the way, I started doing things just for myself. I joined a painting class at the community center and discovered that my hands that had spent decades scrubbing floors and wiping tears, could also create landscapes and seascapes that made people pause and say, "That's beautiful." I joined a book club at the library and found myself surrounded by women with stories of their own. Marriages that drained them, children who took advantage, years they couldn't get back. One afternoon during book club, I shared a small piece of my story. Not every detail at first, just enough for the women to see themselves in it. Afterwards, one of them quietly approached me and said, "My son handles my money too. I don't really know what's going on. Maybe I should." Later that week, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Ames," a young voice said. "My name is Maria. I work at the community center. One of the ladies from your book club mentioned what you went through. We wondered if you might be willing to share your story with other seniors who are dealing with financial abuse. Only if you're comfortable, of course." Old Delilah would have said no instantly. She would have worried about shame, about causing trouble, about people judging her for letting it happen. The new Delilah said, "Let me think about it." I talked it over with Vivien and with Pet. They didn't push me. They just reminded me of how many nights I'd wished someone had told me that what I was going through wasn't normal. "Fear means it matters," Vivien said. "If you weren't scared, it would mean you didn't care one way or another." A week later, I sat in a circle of chairs at the community center, facing 10 women whose faces carried the same lines of worry mine had once worn. Some had had their savings drained by grandchildren. Others had been pressured to sign homes over to relatives for convenience. All of them had been told, in one way or another, to be quiet and not make a fuss. I told them everything. About Jeremiah's trust. About the lie of the debts. About 5 years living on scraps while my son bought luxury and called it hard work. About the night it all exploded over a birthday dinner. About the lawyer. The statements. The agreement. Freedom. When I finished, the room was full of soft sniffles and eyes shining with a mix of grief, anger, and something else, relief. "How did you find the courage to stand up to your own child?" one woman asked. "I didn't find it all at once," I answered honestly. "I built it. Day by day, decision by decision." The first brave act was admitting to myself that what was happening was wrong. The second was saying it out loud. After that, every step got a little easier, because it was taking me away from a life where I was invisible. Since then, I've met with that group twice a month. We talk about rights and boundaries. We invite legal aid workers to explain things in simple language. I've gone with 2 women to their first meetings with attorneys so they wouldn't have to walk in alone. I've watched them go from whispering their stories to telling them out loud. It's been almost a year now since that birthday, since my world shattered and rearranged itself into something new. My days are still simple, but they are mine. I wake up early to watch the sunrise from my balcony. I drink real coffee because I can. I paint. I read. I help where I can, and I rest when I need to, without feeling like I'm failing the world. Do I still feel pain? Yes. Betrayal doesn't evaporate just because justice has been served. But the pain doesn't own me anymore. It's just one part of my story, not the title of my life. This morning, I stood in front of the mirror again. Same woman. Same age. Same body. But something in my posture has changed. My shoulders aren't quite as slumped. My chin lifts a little higher. "They stole years from me and called it love," I murmured to my reflection. But I took those years back in silence, with truth and with courage. I smiled at myself. It felt strange and wonderful to realize I finally believed the words that followed. "I deserve peace," I said. "I deserve comfort. I deserve respect. And I don't need anyone's permission to claim what's mine." Justice, I've learned, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves quietly, carried by signatures and hard conversations and firm boundaries. Strength doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it's the soft, steady voice that says, "No more," and actually means it. And freedom. It doesn't arrive like a lottery ticket or a miracle. It begins the moment you decide that your life matters, and then refuse to keep living like it doesn't. Did you enjoy walking through my story with me? From wherever you're listening, whatever city, whatever corner of the world, you're welcome here. I'd love to know where you are and what part of this story spoke to you most. If you'd like to support more life stories like this, your kindness means more than you know. On the screen, you'll find 2 more stories I think you'll enjoy, each one a journey of someone finding their voice after being silent for too long. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next life story. With love and respect, until we meet in the next one.